The sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb outside La Cille, its engine purring softly before falling silent. The restaurant's golden lights spilled onto the sidewalk, highlighting the line of people waiting hopefully for a chance at a last-minute table. Some of them glanced over, curious to see who would step out of such an impressive car. Michael Big Shaq Thompson took a deep breath before opening the door. Despite owning numerous businesses and being worth millions, he still felt a flutter of nerves when checking on his investments personally. This restaurant was special. He bought it 6 months ago after falling in love with the food, but had kept his ownership quiet. Tonight, he wanted to see how the place really ran when no one knew the boss was watching. He'd left his usual sharp suits at home. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a simple black polo that stretched across his broad shoulders. His basketball days might be behind him, but at 6'8", with his muscular build, Big Shaq never quite blended into a crowd. "Sir, do you have a reservation?" the young hostess asked, her eyes widening slightly as she looked up and up at him. "Table for one." "Under the name Richards," he said quietly. It was his middle name, the one he used when he didn't want to be recognized. The hostess checked her tablet and nodded. "Right this way, Mr. Richards." Big Shaq followed her through the buzzing main dining room. The place looked good, better than good. The renovations he'd approved last month had transformed the already upscale space into something truly spectacular. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the deep blue walls. Well-dressed diners leaned toward each other over white tablecloths, the clink of fine china and soft laughter creating the perfect background music. He smiled to himself. The restaurant had been struggling when he bought it, but he'd seen its potential. Now it was one of the hottest spots in town, with a 3-month waiting list for reservations. Being the owner did have some perks, like always having a table. "Your server will be with you shortly," the hostess said, placing a leather-bound menu in front of him. Big Shaq nodded his thanks and settled into his chair, deliberately choosing to sit with his back to most of the room. Tonight wasn't about being recognized. It was about experiencing his restaurant as a regular customer would. He watched the staff move around the dining room. The manager, Paul, was the only one who knew who he really was. Paul caught his eye from across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod before turning back to the guests he was speaking with. "Good man, Paul. Professional. Discreet." Big Shaq felt proud of what they built here. When he retired from basketball 10 years ago, everyone expected him to become just another celebrity with failing business ventures. Instead, he'd studied, learned, and built an empire that now included hotels, gyms, clothing lines, and restaurants like this one. But he never let success go to his head. His mama had raised him better than that. He was just opening his menu when he sensed someone approach his table. Looking up, he saw a young woman with her blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her expression shifted quickly, first professional, then surprised, then something else. Something that made his stomach tighten with a familiar feeling. "Good evening," she said, her tone cooler than the water she poured into his glass. "My name is Tiffany, and I'll be your server tonight." Big Shaq smiled warmly, determined to start the evening on a friendly note. "Nice to meet you, Tiffany. I've heard great things about the food here." She looked him up and down, her eyes lingering on his broad shoulders and muscular arms. Then she gave him a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Have you dined with us before?" she asked, in a tone that suggested she already knew the answer. "First time," he lied smoothly. "I see," she said. "Well, our clientele is usually—" She paused, searching for words. "Let's just say we cater to a certain type of customer. The chef's tasting menu is quite sophisticated." The implication was clear. She didn't think he belonged here. Big Shaq just nodded, his smile never faltering though it no longer reached his eyes. "I'm sure I'll find something I like." Little did Tiffany know that she was speaking to the man who signed her paychecks. But Big Shaq wasn't about to tell her. Not yet anyway. The night was just beginning. Tiffany made her way back to the kitchen, already annoyed that she'd been assigned to the table in the corner. She pushed through the swinging doors and grabbed her notepad. "Table 12 is ready to order," she told the kitchen staff, though they were barely listening, busy with the Friday night rush. Some guy who looks like he wandered in from the gym. Her coworker Danny looked up from where she was arranging desserts. "Who? The big guy?" "Yeah, wearing a polo shirt to Lucille. Can you believe it? Tiffany rolled her eyes. 3 months on the waiting list and people can't even dress properly. Dunny shrugged. Maybe he's somebody. Trust me, he's nobody. Just some guy who probably won a gift card. Tiffany glanced at her reflection in one of the stainless steel cabinets, straightening her black tie. She'd worked at 5 different high-end restaurants, and she knew the type of people who belonged at places like Lucille. This was her ticket to managing a top restaurant someday, and she took pride in maintaining the standards. Taking a deep breath, she painted on her professional smile and went back out to the dining room. Lucille was definitely the fanciest place she ever worked. The clientele usually included celebrities, politicians, and billionaires, people who appreciated the finer things in life, people who knew how to behave in a place like this. "Are you ready to order, sir?" she asked, her pen poised above her notepad. She stood a little farther from the table than usual, as if his size made her uncomfortable. Big Shaq looked up from the menu. "The sea bass sounds good. How is it prepared?" Tiffany's eyebrows lifted slightly. "It's a delicate dish, very light, very sophisticated." She emphasized the last word, her implication clear. "I see," he said with a gentle smile. "I was an athlete, so I'm careful about what I eat. Is the chef able to prepare it without butter?" Tiffany clicked her tongue. "The chef prepares dishes as they're meant to be served. That's why people come here." She lowered her voice, though not enough that nearby tables couldn't hear. "If you're worried about calories, perhaps the salad would be more appropriate." An older couple at the next table exchanged uncomfortable glances. Big Shaq's expression didn't change, though something flickered in his eyes. "I'll stick with the sea bass then, and a bottle of still water. No wine." Her tone suggested this was another strike against him. "Not tonight." Tiffany wrote down his order with a barely concealed sigh, as if his simplicity was testing her patience. "Very well." As she walked away, she passed Paul, the restaurant manager. He'd been watching the exchange with a strange expression. "Everything okay with table 12?" he asked quietly. "Fine," she said. "Just another one-egger who doesn't know how to act in a place like this." Paul gave her an odd look, but said nothing more as she continued to the kitchen to place the order. For the next 20 minutes, Tiffany kept her distance from Big Shaq's table, focusing on her other guests, a famous actress, a retired politician, and a tech CEO, people who, in her mind, belonged at Lucille. People worth impressing. When the food was ready, she carried the perfectly plated sea bass to table 12, setting it down without the flourish she reserved for her important customers. "Anything else?" she asked, already turning away. "Actually," Big Shaq said, "the chef didn't hold the butter." Tiffany's smile tightened. "I'm sorry, but as I mentioned, the chef prepares the dishes as they're meant to be served. That's what makes Lucille special." Big Shaq nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, but I specifically requested no butter due to dietary restrictions." "Dietary restrictions?" She glanced pointedly at his muscular frame. "Or are you just one of those gym people obsessed with their protein and macros or whatever?" The couple at the next table were now openly staring, shocked by her rudeness. "I can take it back," she said with a sigh, "but the chef won't be happy." "That would be appreciated," Big Shaq said quietly. His calm only seemed to irritate her more. As Tiffany snatched the plate and headed back to the kitchen, she didn't notice Paul watching from across the room, his face growing increasingly concerned. Nor did she see Big Shaq pull out his phone and send a quick text message. In the kitchen, she slammed the plate down. "Table 12 wants his sea bass remade. No butter. Says it's a dietary restriction." She made air quotes with her fingers. The chef looked up, annoyed. "Who's the guest?" "Nobody important," Tiffany said confidently. "Just some gym guy who doesn't belong here." She had no idea how wrong she was. The chef grumbled but prepared a fresh plate of sea bass without butter. Tiffany waited, tapping her foot impatiently against the polished kitchen floor. This wasn't how her night was supposed to go. She'd been hoping to serve the mayor, who was rumored to be coming in later. Instead, she was stuck with table 12. When the new dish was ready, she carried it back to Big Shaq's table, placing it down with noticeably less care than she would for her other guests. "Here you are, no butter." Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. Is there anything else you'd like changed about our award-winning chef's signature dish? Big Shaq looked at the food, then up at Tiffany. His eyes were kind despite her tone. This looks perfect. Thank you. His politeness only irritated her more. She dealt with difficult customers before, the ones who snapped their fingers to get her attention or talked down to her like she was nothing. Those people were easy to dislike. But this guy's patience was somehow worse. It felt like he was judging her, even though he was the one who didn't fit in. You know, she said, lowering her voice but not enough, we have a dress code here. For future reference. She glanced meaningfully at his polo shirt. The older gentleman at the next table cleared his throat loudly, obviously uncomfortable with how she was treating Big Shaq. His wife whispered something that sounded like disgraceful. Tiffany ignored them. I appreciate the advice, Big Shaq said calmly. He cut a small piece of fish and tasted it. This is excellent. Glad it meets your standards. She emphasized the last word with a smirk. Though I wonder if you can really taste the difference without the butter. Most of our guests appreciate the complexity of flavors. Big Shaq put down his fork. I've eaten at restaurants all over the world, from street food in Bangkok to 3-star spots in Paris. Good food is good food, fancy or not. Tiffany's face flushed. Who did this guy think he was? Well, Le Seal isn't for everyone. We cater to a particular clientele. And what clientele is that? He asked, his voice still frustratingly calm. She hesitated, knowing she was crossing a line but unable to stop herself. People who understand fine dining. People who, she looked him up and down, fit in. From across the room, Paul had been watching with growing alarm. He started making his way toward them, but was stopped by another guest with a question. Tiffany continued her subtle jabs throughout the meal. When Big Shaq asked about dessert options, she suggested the fruit plate, adding, "It's our lightest option." When he requested another glass of water, she remarked, "At least someone's watching their figure," loud enough for nearby tables to hear. The couple next to them eventually asked to be moved to another section, shooting disapproving looks at Tiffany as they left. By the time Big Shaq finished his meal, most of the dining room had picked up on Tiffany's behavior. Waiters whispered to each other by the service station. The hostess kept glancing over nervously. Only Paul seemed truly worried, rather than just curious or scandalized. Tiffany dropped the check on the table with a curt, "Whenever you're ready." No smile, no thank you, none of the warmth she showed her other tables. Big Shaq studied the bill for a moment, then pulled out a credit card and placed it on the leather folder. Tiffany snatched it up and walked away without a word. When she returned with the receipt, she couldn't help one final dig. "I hope everything was accessible for you. We typically serve people with more refined tastes." Big Shaq signed the bill and added a generous tip despite everything. He looked up at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, not anger, not hurt, but something that made her suddenly uncomfortable. "You know," he said quietly, "in my experience, the best restaurants make everyone feel welcome. The best servers too." Tiffany's smile faltered for the first time. There was something in his voice, a quiet authority that made her stomach knot. "Is there a problem here?" Paul had finally broken free and hurried over to the table. "No problem at all," Big Shaq said, standing up to his full height. "But I would like to speak with you privately, if you have a moment." Paul swallowed hard and nodded. "Of course, Mr. Just in private," Big Shaq cut him off quickly, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Tiffany. And suddenly, Tiffany had the strangest feeling that she'd made a terrible mistake. Paul led Big Shaq toward the small office at the back of the restaurant, his shoulders tense. He'd been watching the disaster unfold all evening, powerless to step in without revealing his boss's identity. Now the moment he'd been dreading had arrived. Tiffany returned to the waiter's station, a strange feeling settling in her stomach. The way Paul had rushed over, the way he'd almost said the man's name, something wasn't adding up. "What's going on with your table?" Danny asked, sidling up beside her. "Nothing. Just some guy who doesn't belong here," Tiffany said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Then why is Paul taking him to the office?" Danny pointed toward the back where the two men were disappearing behind a door. Tiffany shrugged. "Probably complaining about me, like I care." But she did care. This job at La Ciel was her stepping stone to bigger things. A complaint from a customer, even one she deemed unimportant, could be trouble. Inside the office, Paul closed the door and turned to Big Shaq with an apology ready. "Mr. Thompson, I am so incredibly sorry about Tiffany's behavior. I wanted to intervene, but I knew you prefer to remain anonymous when you visit, and I—" Big Shaq raised a hand, stopping Paul mid-sentence. "It's not your fault." He sat in one of the chairs across from the desk, his large frame making the furniture look small. "How long has she worked here?" "Just 3 weeks," Paul said, sitting on the edge of the desk. "She came with excellent references from the Grand in Chicago. Her technical service is impeccable, but her attitude—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Has she treated other customers this way?" Big Shaq's voice was calm, but his eyes were serious. Paul hesitated. "Not that I've seen. But we've had a few complaints about her being judgmental. Nothing as bad as tonight." Big Shaq nodded slowly, taking this in. "And the other staff? How do they feel about her?" "Mixed. She knows the business, but she's not exactly winning popularity contests in the kitchen." Outside the office, Tiffany was growing more anxious. She'd started clearing Big Shaq's table, replaying the evening in her mind. The way the manager had almost said his name. The generous tip despite her behavior. The quiet authority in his voice. "Hey," she called to one of the busboys. "That guy at 12. Do you know who he is?" The young man shook his head. "No idea." She turned to the bartender next. "The big guy in the polo. Does he come here often?" The bartender gave her an odd look. "Can't say I've seen him before." Back in the office, Big Shaq leaned forward in his chair. "I have a decision to make, Paul, and I'd like your input." Paul looked surprised. Despite owning the restaurant, Big Shaq rarely got involved in staffing issues. "The easy thing would be to fire her," Big Shaq continued. "She was unprofessional, judgmental, and created an uncomfortable atmosphere for other diners." Paul nodded in agreement. "But," Big Shaq added, "I'm not sure that's the right move." "Sir?" Paul's eyebrows rose in surprise. Big Shaq stood up and paced the small office. "I've been where she is, young, ambitious, thinking I knew everything about the game. Sometimes the best lessons come from being wrong." Out in the dining room, Tiffany was growing more desperate. She'd approached 3 more staff members, but no one recognized the mysterious customer. As she passed the hostess stand, a thought struck her. "Hey, can I see the reservation list?" she asked the hostess. The young woman hesitated. "I'm not supposed to." "It's important," Tiffany insisted. Reluctantly, the hostess turned her tablet so Tiffany could see. She scrolled down to table 12, Richard's, party of 1. The name meant nothing to her. She was about to walk away when she noticed the note attached to the reservation, VIP, owner's table. Tiffany's blood ran cold. "Owner's table," she repeated. The hostess shrugged. "That's what it says. I just seat them where I'm told." Inside the office, Big Shaq had reached a decision. "I want to talk to her, Paul. Not as a customer, but as the owner." Paul looked uncertain. "Are you sure that's wise?" "No," Big Shaq admitted with a small smile. "But sometimes the hardest conversations are the most important ones." Paul nodded and reached for the door. "I'll get her." As Paul stepped into the dining room, he saw Tiffany standing frozen at the hostess stand, her face pale as reality began to dawn on her. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, she knew exactly who had been sitting at table 12. Tiffany felt like the floor was tilting beneath her feet. The room seemed too hot, too loud, too bright. Paul was walking toward her now, his face unreadable. Behind him, she could see curious glances from her coworkers. They didn't know what was happening, but they could sense something big was unfolding. "He wants to speak with you," Paul said quietly when he reached her. Tiffany swallowed hard. He's the owner?" Her voice came out as a whisper. Paul nodded once. "Michael Thompson, Big Shaq. Former basketball star, current owner of this restaurant and about 20 other businesses." The name hit her like a truck. Of course, she should have recognized him. His face had been on billboards, commercials, magazine covers. How had she not seen it? The height, the build, the quiet confidence. It all made sense now. "I'm fired, aren't I?" she asked, her voice small. Paul didn't answer. He's waiting. The walk to the office was the longest of Tiffany's life. Every step felt like moving through quicksand. Her mind raced with excuses, apologies, explanations, none of them good enough. She'd mocked the owner of Le Ciel to his face, repeatedly in front of other customers. Paul opened the door for her, then stepped back. "I'll give you two some privacy," he said, closing the door behind her. Big Shaq was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He turned when she entered, and Tiffany finally saw him clearly. The man she'd been serving all night was Michael Big Shaq Thompson, one of the most successful athletes-turned-businessmen in the country. His restaurants were written up in all the major food magazines. He owned hotels, clothing lines, production companies, and she'd spent the evening making snide comments about his body. "Mr. Thompson, she began, but words failed her. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from the desk. Tiffany sat, her legs no longer trustworthy. She felt hot tears threatening to spill from her eyes and blinked them back furiously. Crying wouldn't help her now. Big Shaq took his time sitting down, studying her with those calm, thoughtful eyes that now seemed so familiar from countless interviews and talk show appearances. "Do you know why I bought this restaurant?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "No, sir." "I came here on a date 6 years ago, back when I was still playing ball." He smiled slightly at the memory. "I was wearing a suit that night, custom-made. Cost more than some cars. But the staff treated me exactly the same as the guy at the next table who was wearing jeans and a regular button-down." Tiffany looked down at her hands, shame burning in her chest. "When the chef came out to say hello, he didn't talk about seeing me play or ask for an autograph. He asked if I enjoyed the food. He treated me like a customer, not a celebrity." Big Shaq leaned forward. "That's what fine dining should be about, making everyone feel like they belong, whether they're wearing designer labels or not." "I'm sorry," Tiffany whispered. "I was completely out of line." "Yes, you were," he agreed, his voice firm but not cruel. "But I'm curious about something. Why? Why treat a customer that way?" Tiffany took a shaky breath. I've worked so hard to get here. To places like this. I started as a dishwasher when I was 16, worked my way up, and I guess I started to think that some people deserve to be here more than others, that I could judge who belongs based on what they wear, how they look." There was no anger in his voice, just genuine curiosity. "Yes," she admitted, "and that was wrong. So wrong." Big Shaq nodded slowly. "When I was playing, people looked at my body and saw strength, a gift. Now that I'm not playing anymore, some people look at the same body and see something else. Too big, too much, not fitting in." Tears finally escaped, running down Tiffany's cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I'll clear out my locker right now." Big Shaq surprised her by sliding a napkin across the desk. "Dry your eyes." "I haven't decided what happens next." Tiffany looked up, confused. "You're not firing me?" "I haven't decided," he repeated. "But first, I'd like to tell you a story about my first restaurant job and what I learned about judging people." Despite everything, Tiffany felt a tiny flicker of hope. She reached for the napkin, her hand trembling slightly. Whatever came next, she would remember this moment when the man she ridiculed all evening handed her a napkin for her tears. Big Shaq leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as if looking into the past. "When I was 19, fresh out of my first year of college basketball, I got a summer job at a steakhouse. Nothing fancy like this place, just a regular spot where people came to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries, the kind of place where you save up to go." Tiffany dabbed at her eyes, listening. "I was a busboy," Big Shaq continued. "Clearing tables, refilling water glasses, basic stuff. The manager hired me because I was on the basketball team, thought it might bring in some customers." He chuckled at the memory. "One night, this older man came in. Work boots, worn jeans, flannel shirt. Looked like he'd just come from a construction site." Tiffany felt a knot form in her stomach, already sensing where the story was headed. The hostess seated him in the back corner, away from the other guests. The server, guy named Kenny, treated him like dirt. Rushed him through his order, barely checked on him, laughed with the other servers about his clothes. Big Shaq shook his head. "I watched it all while I was clearing nearby tables. "What happened?" Tiffany asked quietly. "The man finished his meal, paid, and left a standard tip despite the treatment. Nothing dramatic. But as he was leaving, the owner came running in from the back, calling the man's name. Turns out, he was the contractor who had built the restaurant 20 years earlier. He just finished a big job and wanted to celebrate in the place he helped create." Tiffany winced. The owner was upset. Furious, Kenny got fired on the spot. But here's the thing, the contractor came back the next night, came in wearing the same work clothes, sat at the counter, and asked to speak to the busboy who'd refilled his water all night. Big Shaq smiled at the memory. "That was me. He told me he noticed how I treated everyone the same, whether they were in suits or work clothes. Said it showed character. Turned out he was looking for someone to help manage a property he was developing. Offered me a job on the spot, my first real business opportunity." He leaned forward, his eyes now focused intently on Tiffany. "That man changed my life because he saw something in me that had nothing to do with basketball. He taught me that real success isn't about what you achieve, but how you treat people along the way." The office felt very quiet. Outside, they could hear the bustle of the restaurant continuing, plates clinking, muted conversations, the normal Friday night rush. "I should have been fired that night," Tiffany admitted. "What I did was worse than what Kenny did." Big Shaq nodded slowly. "Maybe. But firing you would be easy. Too easy. And you might just go to another restaurant with the same attitude, judging people by how they look." "I wouldn't," she said quickly. "I've learned my lesson. I really have." "Words are easy," Big Shaq replied. "Change is hard." He stood up and walked around the desk, his large frame making the office seem suddenly smaller. "So here's what I'm proposing." Tiffany held her breath. "Two choices. Option 1, you leave tonight, with 2 weeks severance. Clean break, no hard feelings." She nodded. It was more than fair. "Option 2, he continued, is harder. You stay, but you work with me personally for the next month. You learn about the restaurant from the ground up, including why I make it a point to welcome everyone, regardless of appearance. You help develop a training program for our staff about unconscious bias and the real meaning of hospitality." Tiffany blinked in surprise. "You'd give me that chance? After how I treated you?" "Everyone deserves a second chance," Big Shaq said simply. "But not everyone takes it. This won't be easy. You'll be working directly with me and Paul. Every aspect of service, from dishwashing to greeting guests. And at the end of the month, we'll decide together if this is the right place for you." He held out his hand. "So what's it going to be? The easy way out, or the hard road to something better?" Tiffany looked at his extended hand. The same man she'd mocked and judged all evening was now offering her a path to redemption. She thought about her journey from dishwasher to server, about all the times she'd felt judged herself. Then she thought about the person she wanted to be versus the person she'd been tonight. She stood and took his hand. "The hard road," she said firmly. "I want to be better." Big Shaq smiled, and for the first time that evening, Tiffany saw the man behind the legend, not just a successful businessman or former athlete, but someone who genuinely believed in second chances. "Good," he said. "We start tomorrow." 3 months later, on a busy Saturday night, Les Ciel was packed with its usual mix of celebrities, business executives, and special occasion diners. The restaurant hummed with conversation and laughter, the soft clink of silverware against fine china creating a pleasant backdrop. By the entrance, Tiffany greeted an elderly couple celebrating their 50th anniversary. She wore the same crisp black uniform as before, but everything else about her had changed. Her smile was genuine as she led them to one of the best tables in the house, not the corner by the kitchen where she might have seated them before. "Your server will be with you shortly," she said warmly. "But first, could I tell you about our chef's special anniversary dessert? It's not on the menu, but we'd love to prepare it for your celebration tonight." The couple beamed with delight as Tiffany described the special treat. At a nearby table, Big Shaq watched the interaction with a smile. He sat with potential investors discussing his latest business venture, but his attention kept drifting to his staff, particularly Tiffany. The past 3 months hadn't been easy for her. As promised, Big Shaq had put her through every position in the restaurant. She'd washed dishes until her hands pruned. She'd helped the chefs prep vegetables for hours. She'd carried heavy trays as a food runner and folded endless napkins as a busser. But the hardest part hadn't been the physical work. It had been facing her own biases. Big Shaq had made her the face of a new training program at LaSalle, one where she openly shared her mistake and what she'd learned from it. Her story had become a powerful teaching tool for the entire staff. "Excuse me," Big Shaq said to his dinner companions. "There's someone I need to speak with briefly." He crossed the dining room to where Tiffany was arranging menus at the host's stand. "How's it going tonight?" he asked. Tiffany smiled. "Full house. We've got the basketball team in the private room, that food blogger at table 9, and Mr. Chen just arrived for his usual table. I noticed how you handled the couple celebrating their anniversary. Very nice touch with the special dessert." Tiffany's expression grew serious. 3 months ago, I probably would have seated them by the kitchen. I'd have assumed they weren't big spenders because of their age and casual clothes. And now? Big Shaq prompted. "Now I see people, not outfits or bank accounts." She gestured toward the bustling dining room. "That guy in jeans might own a tech company. That woman in the simple dress might be a food critic. Or they might just be regular people saving up for a special night out. It doesn't matter. Everyone deserves the same excellent service." Big Shaq nodded, satisfied. "The staff training program you developed is being implemented in all my restaurants next month. The managers are impressed with the results here." Tiffany looked stunned. "Really? All of them?" "Hospitality is hospitality, whether it's here or at my place in Chicago or Los Angeles." He handed her an envelope. "This is for you." She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter offering her a promotion to training director for all of Thompson Restaurant Group's fine dining establishments. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it. "You're serious," she whispered. "Dead serious. You made a mistake, owned it, and turned it into something valuable for everyone around you. That's the kind of person I want on my team." Tears welled in her eyes, but unlike last time, these were tears of gratitude. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take the job," Big Shaq replied with a smile. "Your first assignment will be in New York next month." Before she could answer, Paul approached with an apologetic look. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. There's a man at the bar wearing shorts and a t-shirt." Danny wasn't sure if she should seat him. Big Shaq raised an eyebrow at Tiffany. "What do you think we should do?" Without hesitation, Tiffany replied, "Seat him at our best available table. Treat him like he's the most important guest in the restaurant." She paused, then added with a smile, "For all we know, he might own the place." Big Shaq laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that turned heads throughout the dining room. "I think you're ready for that promotion," he said, extending his hand. This time, when they shook hands, it wasn't as owner and employee. It was as two people who understood that sometimes the greatest lessons come from our biggest mistakes.